Folklore is an all-time favorite for anyone who loves a good scare. Some folklore stays around, whether based on actual events or told to teach lessons. Sometimes they get turned into modern myths that still scare us, or into scary horror movies. Movies like Midsummer and The Witch prove that folk horror is more common on the big screen now. In this video, we'll discuss 10 horror movies based on American folklore. First off, Black Christmas in 1974. A lot of people consider this one to be the first slasher movie. It takes place in a sorority house, where a group of sorority sisters is killed one by one after getting threatening phone calls. Jess is one of the first final girls in a horror movie. As the other girls around her go missing, she becomes increasingly suspicious. But the absolute terror starts when it turns out that the phone calls are coming from inside the house. Even though the babysitter and the man upstairs has been remade twice, the original Black Christmas is the best story version. But the movie changes the story by following a group of women in a sorority. Unlike other movies that have used this trope, the killer in Black Christmas was never revealed. This makes the slasher movie even scarier. A few hilarious parts in the movie happen at just the correct times, usually with the help of a supporting character, while still keeping things intense. Up next is Sleepy Hollow in 1999. Sleepy Hollow is one of Tim Burton's best movies, and it tells the story of the Headless Horseman in a way that's both scary and romantic. In the movie, Ichabod Crane's not a teacher like in Irving's story. Instead, he's a police officer looking into murders in the haunted house of Sleepy Hollow, an authentic village in New York that you can visit today. Based on the legend of Sleepy Hollow is a story by Washington Irving about a ghost rider who haunts the road with his head. The Headless Horseman may be based on a real Hessian soldier killed by a cannonball during the Battle of White Plains around Halloween 1776. At least, that's what the New York Society says. This is, among other things, a stunning movie with production design, art direction, and cinematography that makes it a unique place for the mind to wander. Followed by The Burning in 1981. This underrated slasher movie came out around the same time as classic horror movies like Friday the 13th. It's loosely based on the urban legend of Cropsey. In the movie, a group of campers play a joke on a counselor, burn him, and then he kills the campers who did this to him. Cropsey is based on a true story of the Staten Island boogeyman, similar to how Jason Voorhees got his revenge arc. Cropsey was first a monster in a story, like The Hookman, that was meant to scare kids into staying close to home. The lineup says the killer was an escaped mental patient with a hook for a hand who hunted children and dragged them back to the tunnel system. But Andre Rand, a real serial killer in Staten Island, was considered the real Cropsey. The effects in the movie were pretty good. Tom Savini was hired to do the special effects, and the killings were more bloody and creative than most slasher movies of the time. The movie was eventually banned and only shown in some places because of how bloody it was, which is great for horror fans. Moving on to Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark in 2019. The movie's based on a book of scary stories for kids written by Alvin Schwartz. Many of the scary stories come from folklore or urban legends. The Red Spots, a scary urban legend that's been around since the 1980s. It was first published in a book of short stories called The Mexican Pet, New Urban Legends, by an American folklorist named Jan Brunvan. Schwartz's version is said to have been influenced by his story, The Spider Bite, but even that story comes from an older myth. In both Brunvan's and Schwartz's story, a woman goes on vacation and gets bitten by a spider. The bite gets bigger and bigger until it turns into a boil. Inside the boil, the spider eggs hatch and a swarm of tiny spiders crawl out. Next, The Mothman Prophecies in 2002. The Mothman Prophecies is a scary horror movie about a giant moth that looks like a person. When a sad reporter is mysteriously drawn to a small town in West Virginia, he learns that a moth-like creature's been causing trouble and has been seen. He thinks this is a terrible sign of bad things to come. The movie's based on a real myth. It was made into a movie from a book written by John Keel after people saw a huge Mothman in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in 1966. The creature is linked to the 1967 collapse of the Silver Bridge over the Ohio River in both the book and the movie. The soundtrack's especially scary. It skillfully mixes keyboard, static, and other sounds from the movie, which makes you feel more and keeps you on your toes because the movie's partly about static and other sounds. Not to mention When a Stranger Calls. In the original When a Stranger Calls and the remake, a babysitter gets one of the creepiest phone calls in horror movies. The famous line from the remake is, "The call is coming from inside the house." The insidious cat and mouse game between the babysitter and the killer's since been re-imaged in various other horror movies, like Scream. The familiar horror trope comes from a story called The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs, which has been told at sleepovers for decades. But there may be some truth to the story. Medium says that the story started with a murder in March 1950 in the town of Columbia, Missouri. Janet Crispin, a young babysitter, was attacked and killed after calling for help. The case still hasn't been solved. Let's learn more about Slender Man in 2018. After the Slender Man story on Creepypasta went viral and even made 2 young girls kill someone, the story was turned into a movie. In Slender Man, a group of girls try to summon the Slender Man, a mix of the meme that won the contest and horror tropes. When one of them goes missing, they start to wonder if the monster they saw on the computer is genuine. Unlike most folklore, Slender Man's a modern urban legend, crafted and fueled by the internet. During a photo shoot horror contest, Victor Surge came up with the idea of Slender Man. He used 2 pictures of a group of kids, with a scary, faceless man in a suit and tie hovering in the background. He wrote in the caption that the photos were from the late 1980s. Surge created a modern urban legend when the winning photos spread quickly online. Coming up, The Witch. The Witch is a folk horror movie set in the 17th century. It's a psychological horror about a Puritan family that has been kicked out of the church and is living in the wilderness of New England. Robert Eggers, the movie's director, used a stark setting and accurate historical details to look at how a family cursed by evil forces went crazy and destroyed itself. The Witch uses real stories from the Salem witch trials to mix old New England stories with pagan beliefs. In an article for Time, witch expert Catherine Howe talks about other historical details in the movie, such as the threat seen in the nearby wilderness and the minor hardships that were thought to be caused by witches. Eggers spent years researching 17th century New England because he wanted to make a scary movie that was true to life. Next, I Know What You Did Last Summer. This is one of the best summer horror movies because it combines the warning tale, The Hookman, with slasher horror tropes. In the cult movie from the 1990s, 4 friends get back together after getting a note saying they killed a man in a hit-and-run accident. In a classic slasher movie style, a fisherman with a hook then follows them and kills them. The Hookman, or The Hook, known for being a scary campfire story, has been made into several movies. According to an urban legend, a young couple's driving when they hear a strange noise. When they get out of the car, they find an escaped mental patient with a hook for a hand. Some people think the story is about the Texarkana moonlight murders that happened in 1946. Finally, Candyman. Candyman was based on Clive Baker's story, The Forbidden, but it told the horror story through the lens of race. Because of racism and hate, the Candyman kills to spread fear and keep his legend alive. After saying his name repeatedly in the mirror, he appears with a hook in his hand. Jordan Peele's new version of Candyman's a sequel to the original supernatural slasher movie. Each version took parts of the urban legends of The Hookman and Bloody Mary, but Candyman's different from other movies based on folklore because the villain becomes an urban legend in the movie, and the same myth exists outside of the film. Apparently, a source claims that the story has the same warning message as many traditional African American folktales. It also shows a darker side of America during the time of the plantations. On that note, that's a wrap for this video. Which of these horror movies was the scariest for you? Do you think more folklore should be adapted into movies? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.